First, thank you to the participants today. Thank you for coming. We are disappointed that Jess Dixon, Cambridge's current Conservative MPP, declined to participate in the debate, but you'll see her empty podium here in a moment. But John Sewell, the new Blue Party candidate, also declined to participate in this debate. Also, thanks to Rogers TV and their community partner, Citizens for Cambridge, for making this debate happen. Rogers TV will be broadcasting a recording of this debate between now and Election Day at different times. The debate recording will also be available on YouTube for residents to watch at their convenience. For information on viewing both Cambridge debates on demand, links to candidate information and more, just visit citizensforcambridge.org. Now, candidates, we understand that as an MPP, you won't be making policy for your party. However, we'd like to hear what positions you will advocate for within your party and Queen's Park. The debate format allows each candidate to give a 1-minute opening comment, a 1-minute closing comment, and no more than a 1 minute to provide a response to each question. That may seem short, but we have a lot of questions to get through, and for fairness, the 1 minute maximum will be strictly enforced. The candidate speaking order will start as you are alphabetically arranged on the stage and then rotate from then on. So for the first opening statement, we'll turn to Jeff Donkersgood, representing the New Democratic Party. Jeff, you have 1 minute.
Hello, everyone. Thank you to Dan, to Rogers TV, and the citizens of Cambridge for providing us with this opportunity to speak with you all today. I'm an educator, a unionist, social justice activist, father and husband, and I'm running to be your next member of Provincial Parliament under the banner of the Ontario NDP because they are the party that is best positioned to solve many of the complex problems affecting people today. This includes fully and properly investing in public education and public health care, building homes that are accessible and deeply affordable, protecting the environment, respecting the working class, whether they're in a union or not, and actually tackling the cost of living crisis through real investments in social programs. Ontario should be a province full of opportunity, but after 7 long years with the Ford Conservative government, life has become more expensive, and this government's neglect has impacted the lives of so many of us. It is time to act, and it is time for real change, and elect the Ontario NDP.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you to Rogers TV and Citizen Cambridge for this opportunity. My name is Ismail Mohammed, and I'm proud to be the Ontario Liberal candidate for Kitchener South-Hespeler. I've lived in this community for over a decade, and I'm a father of 5, so I understand the challenges families face in today's economy. My wife is a registered nurse, and through her, I have seen how broken our health care system is. I have dedicated my career to community service, working with the City of Kitchener's Community Service Department, advisory committees, local businesses, listening, problem solving, and creating real solutions. As a small business owner and consultant, I've worked in economic development, public health, and education, helping newcomers' businesses, supporting educators, and advocating for youth mental health. I've heard from young people about mental health struggles, gender-based violence, and racial discrimination. We need real action, not empty promises to fund mental health initiatives and ensure safe schools and communities. I'm here to bring bold, community-driven leadership to Queen's Park. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jessica Riley.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jessica Riley, and I'm the Green Party of Ontario candidate here for Kitchener South-Hespeler. I am so excited to be here and to rethink how we as candidates can represent Ontario. I think it's very telling today that the party who has been in charge and who called the election didn't even bother to show up. They do not feel the need to be accountable to you. They do not feel the need to answer to those of us who are willing to voice issues that they've got the most control of right now. As a Green Party candidate, one of my greatest strengths is that I do not have the same kind of pressure as any other party to vote along party lines. So I can listen to my constituents and I can put you first. My background is in the private sector, small businesses, and sustainable packaging, and my community engagement comes through climate action. Thank you.
Thank you once more to all three. The first question of the debate will go to Ismail Mohammed of the Liberal Party. Ismail, we don't know if Canada is entering a tariff crisis period with the U.S. or not. What is your view of how the Ontario government has handled this crisis so far, and what approach to this situation would you advocate for?
Well, that's a great question. So get it done was what the PCs pushed. Now they say protect Ontario, but they haven't gotten it done, and failed to protect Ontario from its greatest threat, a PC government committed to underfunding our critical sectors. So I would say that the tariffs, we are prepared to introduce support for our small businesses, for the Ontario Liberals against the threat of tariffs, lowered interest and tax rate for small businesses to ensure that they keep more money in their pockets. We will also increase the threshold for eligible income. Yes, I understand that we have this issue about the tariffs, but I think Doug Ford has failed to do what's really important in our communities. His mandate, which is health, which is housing, which is mental health, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, the tariff threat is so disappointing coming from the country that should be our allies and best friends. What I'm on board with in terms of what Ontario has done so far, I'm on board with a strong stance of not wavering, standing up to Donald Trump and to these tariff threats, and being willing to use every tool in the toolbox that we have. What I don't like, one of the biggest things I don't like, is calling an election in the middle of this crisis when the Premier already has a majority. In terms of what we'd want to do, immediately, there's some really common sense items that we can tackle. We want to create a tariff task force, and we want to create a Protect Ontario fund to help businesses diversify their supply chain. And in the long term, I think we can strengthen our economy so much by reducing interprovincial barriers and by looking at the long term in terms of what does our community need and listening to the professionals that are already here.
Mr. Donker's good.
20% of residents that live here in the riding of Kitchener South-Hespeler are in manufacturing. And we've got two significant manufacturing industries here with Toyota. We've got the Loblaws Food Distribution Center. There's a real threat to these industries if these tariffs come through. Yet we're in the midst of a provincial election right now, which is just mind-boggling, and a premier that seems more concerned about his image in protecting Ontario than actually doing the actual job. The Ontario NDP, things we will do is obviously diversify our supply chain. We need to start working not just with the United States, but we have to look at other countries. We have to look at interprovincial trade. This is things that we've been talking about doing for a very long time. It's a pro of actually this crisis now happening that's making us realize we have to be able to trade much more easily between the different provinces. And we got to be able to help out local infrastructure. That means doing these projects like housing, roads, all these things. And the one thing I haven't heard from the Ford government with reference to the tariffs, what are they going to do for people with these situations? Is this stimulus going to help just businesses, or are they going to actually help the people of this province who could be potentially at risk with their jobs?
Thank you all three. The next question will begin with Ms. Riley of the Green Party of Ontario. The Association of Municipalities of Ontario has called for a major overhaul of municipal funding, arguing that cities and towns face too many financial demands without enough revenue sources. Do you agree? And if so, how will you push for a better funding plan to support municipalities like Cambridge?
Absolutely, I agree. Watching this province, we've seen them download cost after cost onto municipalities without any relief from it. So I think one of the things that we can do to begin with, and it's certainly in the Green Party platform, is to take some of those costs that have been given to municipalities and bring them back to the province. We're seeing municipalities elsewhere and also here in Waterloo Region need to suddenly increase their property taxes, and it's very confusing to understand why until you understand what the province has done and the fact that the municipalities have been kind of forced to take on more. So I think that's actually the first order of business, and where there are funding gaps, I would be absolutely happy to advocate to fill those.
Mr. Mohammed.
Can you repeat the question again?
Absolutely. So the Association of Municipalities of Ontario has called for a major overhaul of the municipal funding, arguing that cities and towns face too many financial demands without enough revenue sources. Do you agree with that? And if so, how will you push for a better funding plan to support municipalities like Cambridge?
Well, as the Ontario Liberal Party, we've been sharing in our platforms that we will take that burden away from municipalities. I totally agree. The fact that everything is downloaded into our municipalities, and they have to pay everything through the taxes that they collect. So there's a lot of pressure there. What we would do is we would take that back. we will make it an Ontario issue and make sure that we relieve the municipalities so they can do the right work that they're doing in their communities.
Mr. Donkersgood.
Yeah. The Ontario NDP has a new deal for municipalities that we are proposing in our plan, and that's, sharing a balance with reference to funding, a 50-50 split. In particular with infrastructure, but even things such as housing. Municipalities, especially in the city of Kitchener and the region of Waterloo, are having to take on more of this responsibility when they shouldn't have to, especially with helping and assisting with encampments and various other charities. Additionally, we have to be looking at funding transit, and that includes getting that LRT, the stage 2, getting it into Cambridge, because we need to think about our carbon footprint, the environment, getting people moving. So that means we have to be investing in transit for everybody to ensure that this is happening. But to echo the Greens, we're seeing municipalities right now struggling with property taxes, and this is because many of these things that the provincial government used to fund, they just aren't happening anymore. We need to ensure that we strike this balance and work collectively together to ensure we get things done.
And Mr. Donkersgood of the NDP will begin the next round of responses to this next question. Supervised consumption and harm reduction services are evidence-based approaches to reducing overdose deaths. However, Cambridge currently lacks a sanctioned consumption and treatment services, or a CTS site. Do you support expanding Heart Hub services to include CTS? Do you support forced addiction treatment? And how will you advocate for Cambridge and beyond about this at the provincial level?
Yeah, I do support these types of institutions because we need to help our people. This is something that we have lacked in governments across different stripes for my entire lifetime. We need to be preventative, and we need to, instead of reactive to some of the problems that we're facing. So this means we have to actually create supportive housing and wraparound services for mental health and addiction to ensure people are getting the treatment that they need. Forced addiction doesn't necessarily work. Unfortunately, it's an education piece that's really required. People need to feel like there's hope in terms of getting better and doing that. And this is where wraparound services could really assist in this regard. But it does mean getting people out of legislated poverty, finding ways to assist them, whether that's, again, through our plan, doubling ODSP and OW, but finding ways to give people hope, those wraparound services, and to ensure that they get the help that they need. So yes, I am in total support of that, not only in Cambridge, but also assisting in Kitchener as well.
Mr. Mohammed.
The answer that I would give first is yes, I would be supporting that. We have witnessed vital services in our community close because of the BC government. Funding has been withdrawn from already established sites. The sites on Duke Street in Kitchener, for example. Organizations like Sangwin are doing a vital work for our community and need funding restored to make sure that they can continue that work so sites can remain open. Forced treatment is the wrong path for our vulnerable people in KW. Forced treatment will only cause further trauma and distrust, and people may not seek help because of it. Mental health challenges are also part of this, and we need to prepare to invest on those support as well. We must do better and listen to experts on how we can best address these issues.
And Ms. Riley.
Great. Yes, I think on the surface, it's easy to imagine why some people are against safe consumption sites. It's a scary thought, having a deliberate place where people are doing illegal drugs, and I understand that. The reality is that when we take away these sites, they don't solve the problems. They don't solve the problem of drug abuse. They don't solve the problem of drug abuse being in our cities, being in the area, areas that we don't want them, where we need to live in other ways. And what they do solve is, two things primarily. One is the loss of human life that often comes with drug use, and two is, the scattered people and goods that could be happening everywhere else if they weren't at these specific sites. The other thing I do want to say as well, mental health, that's something that the Green Party believes is health, and therefore it should be under OHIP, and we should give a lot more resources to that sector.
Thank you all. This question will be posed first to Mr. Mohammed. Encampments have become a growing issue in Cambridge, sparking debates about clearing them versus establishing authorized encampments with basic services. Do you support the forced removal of encampment residents? And do you believe temporary designated encampment sites with sanitation and support services should be explored? Do you have any other suggestions?
I think the campsites are in support of people that are really lost their homes. Some of them, it's mixed of people, and I think we need to support. For example, the 80,000 people experiencing homelessness in Ontario, over 2,300 are raising are without and rising are without homes in our region. There are not enough support or spaces for them to be housed. We need to support and partner with our municipalities to create solutions. We do not need to criminalize those experiencing homelessness like the PCs have. The PCs have made no effort to support our municipalities. The feds had to step in with the funding solutions. How exactly are they protecting Ontario? I don't know. Like they say that protect Ontario. This is not a way to protect Ontario and make our communities in a very difficult situations.
Ms. Riley.
Tackling homelessness starts with tackling housing. I was lucky enough to be at a press conference earlier today with Mike Schreiner where he announced some of our plans of how we're going to do that. We want to prevent rent evictions. We want to put a moratorium on above guideline rent increases. We want to put all homes under rent stabilization, whether or not they were built before 2018. And we want to create limits between how much you can increase rent between tenants. That's just the beginning, and that's just what's going to help renters, but it is going to help people stay in their homes. The other thing we want to do is we want to build. We want to build 2 million homes over the course of 10 years. We also want to collaborate with nonprofits to build 250,000 new affordable nonprofit and co-op houses, and we want to build 60,000 permanent supportive homes with guaranteed funding for mental health, addictions, and other supports.
Mr. Donkersgood.
Before the Ford Conservatives called this election, they had a bill that was being proposed that was going to allow mayors to use the notwithstanding clause to clear encampments. This is outrageous. It's not what the notwithstanding clause was meant to be used for. It's also completely, inept of humanity and caring for people who are in desperate need. So we need to be supportive of our encampments and finding solutions. Housing is the way to do it, and breaking that cycle of poverty is going to be how we fight the solution. We have to find ways to help people. That means building supportive housing. That means the government has to actually get back involved in that game, something that they lost sight of back in the 1990s at both the federal and the provincial level. We have to find different sort of preventative solutions to assist, whether that is mental health supports, again, doubling different disability claims like ODSP and OW. That's going to be the key to find a way for the solution.
The theme of supportive housing will be touched on in the next question, which will begin with Ms. Riley of the Green Party of Ontario. Supportive housing, affordable units with on-site support services is crucial for addressing homelessness, yet Cambridge has far fewer units than needed. If you agree this is a priority, how will you push for increased provincial funding for more supportive housing projects in Cambridge?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to answer that. Obviously, I've talked about the Green Party plans, but I want to answer that in terms of how I, as one Green Party member in one of the smaller parties, can actually do something there. So Ashlyn Clancy, the representative, the amazing representative in Kitchener Centre, has put forward a lot of motions about housing in general, and this is absolutely something that we can add to that legacy. We are always willing to collaborate with every and any party who will work with us on the right solutions. We also, with the freedom that we have to vote with our consciences and what our constituents want, we can really commit to listening to our constituents, listening to the individuals who live in Cambridge and who want to take leadership on this, and working with them, collaborating with them, and putting forward the legislation that makes the most sense.
Mr. Donkersgood.
Yeah, I touched on this already. It's really going to involve the government actually getting back into the housing game. And that doesn't mean just creating supportive housing, and we've got a plan for our Homes Ontario plan and creating over 60,000 different housing units in that domain, but it's also the deeply affordable housing. We're missing that middle ground. We're kind of concerned right now with tall and sprawl instead of building housing that are including of co-ops, various different types of structures that will assist people. people. It also means we do have to kind of, open up fees for developers. But again, we have to build in the right places. We need to make sure we're reusing land that already exists near urban centers so that people can access everything that they need. But it's a complex problem. It's a problem that's going to involve all levels of government, nonprofits as well, and everyone to come together and collaborate to tackle this issue. And that's something the Ontario NDP is definitely in favor of doing.
Mr. Mohammed.
So Dan, too few home starts. So since the lowest in 1955, we built homes. And renovictions are a huge challenge that we need to address. I've had, through working as a community organizer, I've seen people who've lost their homes, who are working, who've lost their homes because they couldn't afford their rent, right? Housing affordability and renovictions are increasing the homelessness in crisis. Our Ontario Liberal Party has a plan. We will address the backlog in the Tenant board while making sure the cost of living crisis in housing does not increase. The PCs aren't doing enough to build homes. They haven't come even close to their target of 1.5 million homes. Eliminating the provincial land transfer tax for the first-time homebuyers, seniors downsizing, and non-for-profit home builders, saving families and seniors an average $13,500 off the cost of the new home. We need to put the needs of Ontarians first, not developers. That is our commitment.
Next round of questions, beginning with Mr. Donkersgood of the NDP. During the last provincial election, promises were made to eliminate doctor shortages, eliminate hospital hallway medicine, and reduce hospital emergency room wait times. However, these issues persist and are in fact worsening in many hospitals. If elected, what steps will you take to push for meaningful improvements in our healthcare system?
Yeah, we have public health care because of the NDP, because of the legacy of Tommy Douglas and the federal NDP back in the 1960s, and seeing what is happening to our healthcare system today is incredibly troubling. Hallway medicine began on the Liberal government and is continued under the Doug Ford Conservatives. We are not investing properly. We're out $20 billion in terms of actual dollars into that system. And it's great that here in the Waterloo region, we've got St. Mary's General, and we've got also, St. Mary's, and I'm blanking on the name of the hospital, but I apologize. They're merging, and we got a great build that's happening up in Waterloo, but we need more investments. We need to actually go and recruit and retain doctors and nurses and actually show that we care. We cannot use legislation like Bill 124 that is going to deter people from being caring about this. When people have to go to the ER because they don't have a family doctor, we've done something wrong. We need to invest in people in this province.
Mr. Mohammed.
So I want to start off, since Jeff mentioned the Liberals. Parties don't change, but the leadership and policies do change. So what do we have? Our priority number one as Ontario Liberal Party is family doctors. 2.5 without family doctors. Too much burden being put on into our hospitals. We need to support the ones we have and be prepared to increase the supply in the province. Overhead costs are creating challenges that need to be addressed. Look, my wife is a registered nurse, right? I hear this issue day in, day out, the difficulties that we have. We have a little kid who's almost 2 years old that got sick, and when we called the hospital 2 a.m. and it said we have to wait 10 and a half hours. So that's not really. There's other people who have major emergencies that cannot wait that long. So hospital closures, lack of funding. We need to open more, not let them close. Hallway healthcare. Wait times are too long. People are opting for ER due to no family doctors, burdening the system. Attracting and retaining doctors. We will invest in getting doctors into the system here in Ontario. Mental health. Support more people to enter the profession. Open more spaces. Help them support our communities.
Make sure you wrap up
Yeah,
that statement.
So thank you.
Very
And mental
quickly.
health is health. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. Ms. Riley.
Wonderful. The Green Party had some very specific plans to deal with this. We want to recruit 3,500 more doctors so that everyone has a primary care provider within 3 to 4 years. We want to increase nurse practitioners by 2,500 by 2030 and add 6,800 new PSWs by 2028. In order to do this, here's some of the approaches that we're going to take. We're going to increase fast-tracked credential approvals for international healthcare workers. We're going to reduce administrative demand on doctors, take things away that they don't need to be worrying about right now. We want to reduce the backlog in surgeries, images, and diagnostic tests through the creation of a centralized intake and referral system. And we want to make it so that take-home cancer and rare disease medications are publicly funded, which doesn't affect everyone, but it does affect some people so much. I also want to say I've got a friend who just spent, I think, 5 or 6 nights in a hallway in a major hospital in the GTA and had so little privacy she couldn't even handle a phone call with me because there were that many other people in a hallway with her. It's that bad.
Thank you to all three. Now we're going to touch on the topic of regional amalgamation, beginning first with Mr. Mohammed. Waterloo Region seems overgoverned with 64 elected officials and 7 municipal governments plus regional government, raising some serious concerns about inefficiency and cost. Some believe amalgamation would streamline governance, while others fear loss of local representation. What is your position on regional amalgamation, and will you push for changes at Queen's Park?
Well, this is a local issue, and I think it belongs to the municipalities and the people of the region of Waterloo. I know that Doug Ford has done a study. The former chair was leading it. I don't know where that report went and where it's what the decisions were, but I would definitely would have consulted the municipalities, the people who live in this region, and see what they want rather than what government is pushing them to do.
Ms. Riley.
Very similar. I do see the argument on both sides. I understand the need for efficiency. I understand how confusing it can be to deal with multiple different planning codes when you want to plan projects in the region. I understand that there could be really big benefits to amalgamating. At the same time, we don't want to lose community identity. We don't want to lose community self-governments if we don't have to. So very similar. I think my approach here would be to leverage a constituency office to try to get a reading and a feel on what the constituents here want, what works for them, and make sure that they're informed of those benefits and the drawbacks, and take it from there.
Mr. Donkersgood.
So that hospital name that I was so passionately forgetting about, Grand River Hospital, it came back to me, so thankfully. I had the honor of being on the Citizens Compensation Committee for the City of Cambridge during the 2022-2023 year. And part of that study involved actually talking with all the members of council about what their job duties entailed. And through that, we learned pretty quickly that they are working full-time hours for part-time work. So imagining that we would then have every one of our 7 municipalities amalgamated together, trying to reach your local councillor, your mayor even, would be a massive burden. We also just saw an example in Peel region where they tried to amalgamate the cities of Mississauga, Brampton, and the town of Caledon. They realized how expensive that was actually going to be. Now, while the Ontario NDP doesn't have a position with reference to amalgamation, it is one of these things where local representation does really matter, and it would be something that, again, if another study were to come to fruition, it would be one that I hope that everybody is involved in those discussions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Riley, we'll begin the next round of questioning with yourself. Many are concerned about Ontario underfunding of public health care while simultaneously expanding support for private health care. Concerns include the public system losing nurses and doctors that are crucial for an effective public system. Do you share these concerns? And if so, would you support legislation to protect our public health system from excessive privatization?
I absolutely share these concerns. I think we are so lucky to have the accessible public healthcare system that we have that has worked really well in the past and isn't working very well today under the existing government because they haven't been prioritizing it and because they're uninterested in even showing up and being accountable to their constituents and to other people who want to bring up these issues. I would support legislation that protects our public health care, and I want to look at this not just from an access and the right thing to do standpoint, but also an economic standpoint. When we have private agencies that we have to hire out, suddenly those costs become a lot more expensive, either to the government or to the people. Doug Ford kept mentioning the economy in the debate on Monday, the leaders' debate, and I really, really question his strength on the economy when I look at things like that, what that would mean in terms of costs for our province.
Mr. Donkersgood.
Yeah, we are seeing very similar things, as I'm an educator as well, with something known as the privatization playbook, where we see something that's being underfunded and undermined, and then things being sold off to the lowest bidder, and it's creating this crisis. The Waterloo Region Health Coalition that I'm connected with did a study where they realized we are spending the lowest of all the provinces per capita on public health care, which is just atrocious. And what's happening is that people who have access, who have become frustrated with the system, they'll jump the line. We can now, pay for cataract surgery. Or they find hidden costs with reference to blood tests where they're having to pay for it, which didn't used to happen. We also have nursing agencies, which are now, taking away from the public system, and it's costing actually more money to do this. We will eliminate those nursing agencies. We need to invest in our public healthcare system, and again, not just for those that are in need immediately, but we have to think of our whole preventative measures, and that goes with mental health and addiction. It's a massive, massive thing that we need to do, but it has to remain public for the greater good of our province.
Ms. Mohammed.
Well, I would absolutely support and stand behind our system that we have, which is OHIP. And let me tell you, my brother lives in the United States, and he had a surgery, and what he had to pay, even though he had insurance, was ridiculously insane. One of the things that he said to me was, you should be glad you're living in Canada. And I mean, this health system that we have that needs a lifeline at the moment, that Doug Ford is choking, needs to be rebuilt back up again, and really make sure that we fund what we need and give the resources that we need into the system, the great system that we have.
Next round of questioning, we'll touch on public transit expansion, and we'll begin that with Mr. Donkersgood of the NDP. Plans for the Cambridge LRT extension and GO train service to Guelph are being worked on but remain unconfirmed. Do you support these transit expansions? And if so, will you advocate for the necessary provincial funding to make them happen?
Absolutely, absolutely. We need to have the stage 2 of the Iron LRT in Cambridge. It needs to happen. And it's not just to help ease transportation and environmental concerns, but again, it goes to our Ontario NDP plan with reference to building housing and building housing towards transit networks. And then with reference to the GO train, again, absolutely. The fact that we are still waiting for all-day two-way GO train service to Kitchener is outrageous. The congestion on the 401 has become unsustainable for many people who are commuting back and forth to the GTA. And we need to also build this, not just in Cambridge, but also in Hespeler to have that connection to go into Guelph as well, and in order to be able to do that. We heard a story not too long ago of the child and his parents wanting to go to their first Maple Leafs game, and they were late and couldn't go because of a GO train issue. We need to invest in our transit system. It's going to be vital for us moving forward, for our economy, for our province.
Mr. Mohammed.
Well, we need to address and support better active transportation to protect cyclists and pedestrians, right? Too many people are being hurt due to lack of infrastructure. We should encourage, not punish, our municipalities. Bill 212, bike lane bill, was an overstep. LRT Cambridge is our priority too as well. We will work directly with the municipal and the regional governments to bring community consultation and deliver this to our residents. GO transit service needs to be expanded in our region. We are ready to hold Metrolinx accountable for their failure to deliver on promises to expand and add all-day, all-week service. We need to support also a better transportation options to our rural areas as well. And we are all interconnected. So absolutely we support that.
Ms. Riley.
As someone who comes to politics from an environmental standpoint, I will always be in favor of expanding transit at every opportunity. And as someone who also drives, I want to remind our viewers that, when we're on the road and other people have additional options beyond driving, there are fewer cars that we have to be stuck with in traffic. That becomes especially true when you think about Toronto, which honestly, if you want to drive to Toronto on a Friday night, it's a 2-hour journey minimum, and it's awful. We deserve options. We deserve options to get around. We deserve options to have transit that's more affordable as well. Public transit is a huge, huge boost to every element of our lives living in a city. And absolutely, let's bring it to Cambridge. Let's work on getting the GO train going. There's no reason that we shouldn't be better at this right now.
As we turn our focus to critical affordable housing, we'll begin with Mr. Mohammed of the Liberal Party. Critical affordable housing projects frequently face opposition from residents, slowing or stopping development. What measures do you believe the province should take to support municipalities in increasing affordable housing options and overcoming NIMBY resistance?
Well, we are investing in the affordable housing. Ontario Liberals are investing in that. Those are the issues that we are bringing: housing affordability and the issues that we face today is what the PCs for the last 7 years have not touched on. So definitely we will support it, and we will invest in that as well.
Ms. Riley.
Yeah, absolutely. We are so lucky in this region that we have so many great local organizations that are already invested in doing this kind of work. And absolutely, I think a lot of this can be taken on provincially. I have spoken about the Green Party plans to do a lot of direct building ourselves, but we also want to make sure that a big part of our plans include collaborating with organizations who are already doing this work. And I really think, that NIMBY question is really key here. I really think that that is our best bet at getting these things done. Let's work with organizations who have been in this field, who understand the barriers in terms of public resistance better than anyone. And let's leverage those connections and the community connections that exist to really get it done.
Mr. Donkersgood.
Yeah, we are going to need to connect with our communities with reference to being able to build housing, because we're going to start running out of land if we continue to sprawl. A great example, Bill 162, that opened up a lot of land to development across the province, and the largest piece is actually in this riding in the southwest area of Kitchener. It's going to be land built, very environmentally sensitive land, and they're going to put housing on it, but it's on top of natural aquifers. And 80% of the groundwater here in the region of Waterloo comes from the ground, and there's risk of contamination, the potential that we may have to build a pipeline to Lake Erie to actually ensure we have enough water. We're losing 300 plus acres a day in farmland to sprawl and industry. We're going to have to be very conscious of that, because we need to be concerned about food sovereignty moving forward with risks of the tariffs, but also with other things at play. So we're going to have these difficult conversations with our neighborhoods, with our communities, with our community partners, to ensure that we build this mix of housing. And I talked about social housing, and I talked about co-ops and fourplexes and all of these things. We're going to have to get creative and face a lot of difficult decisions, because once that land is gone, it's gone forever.
On the topic of tenant and landlord protections and rent evictions, where landlords evict tenants under the guise of renovations to raise rents, are a growing issue in Ontario. At a 2021 bill, Bill 58, Rent Stabilization Act, aimed to curb this practice but failed to pass. Would you support similar Ontario legislation? And meanwhile, some landlords face serious legal issues dealing with tenants who refuse to pay their rent. How would you work to provide better protection for both tenants and landlords? And we will begin with Ms. Riley of the Ontario Greens.
Great. I am so proud of the Green representative that we've already had, who have already been putting forward motions, with this exact goal in mind. I am a renter. I've been a renter for a long time. My partner and I finally just bought our first home in our late 30s after working full-time for longer than I want to admit. But, I'm still renting right now, and I've felt the consequences on a very personal level of what's been happening in the rental markets. Every solution that I've seen put forward by the Green Party, and I've discussed some of them earlier, they are exactly what we need to solve these issues with rents. And I think that they're going to help also deal with the LTB backlog, honestly. We'd be very, very keen to get that working a lot faster.
Mr. Donkersgood.
Yeah, we need real rent control now. Some of the stories I've been hearing from members when I've been out door knocking have been just heartbreaking, where they have to move for circumstances and then they're having to pay 2 to 3 times as much for rent. I'm also really proud that I've been connected with Acorn Waterloo Region, and I've seen them grow as an organization since they came about in around 2023. And what they have done with reference to fighting for tenants' rights and for organizing has been nothing short sort of impressive. I joined them at the City of Kitchener Council meeting I guess it was last week, where they tried to push things forward to have the city come up with a rent-eviction bylaw, but things are getting stagnant. And I think that's partly because the city's wondering what's going to happen with this provincial election. I can tell you that the Ontario NDP, we want real changes to the tenant tribunal. We need to. It needs to be completely overhauled to ensure that rent evictions do not happen. And there's legislation that's already in place. It just hasn't been enforced. So we're now at this point where we have to do this. People's lives are actually at stake with this. So yes.
Mr. Mohammed.
Well, I would start off by saying the issue about the housing crisis, it has relations to the rent evictions, and the homelessness has also is part of the conversation. So, as a community organizer and as somebody who works in the community for the past 20 years, I have seen and have supported families that the renters have increased the amount of the rents that they're able to pay, and they didn't have a way to pay for it. So there were two gentlemen that became homelessness actually that I supported and figured out, gave them some resources for them to fight back. They were kicked out, and they became part of the homelessness people in encampment. So I had to go back in there and give these people the support that they need and the connections, because they don't even know where to get resources from. And we live in a region that is fastly growing with immigrants that don't know how the system works. So those are the people who we have to fight for. And yes, I will definitely, Ontario Liberals will fight by the backlog of tenant boards as well.
On the topic of long-term care and couples' rights, many couples in long-term care are being separated due to placement policies, creating emotional distress for elderly partners. Would you support legislation ensuring couples can remain together in the same facility, and how would you advocate for this issue? And for that, we turn to Mr. Donkersgood of the NDP for the first response.
This one will be a very quick one. MPP Catherine Fife from Waterloo has now, through I believe 4 or 5 terms in office, been trying to put legislation forward to ensure that this does not happen. It's absolutely heartbreaking that couples, when they're in their senior years, are having to be split and torn apart. So we get into Queen's Park. It's coming back. We need to actually do this because it is completely barbaric that we cannot find a way to resolve this situation, and seniors, being able, to have a peace of mind. And so it's going to come through for sure. We're going to advocate for it.
Mr. Mohammed.
Well, doing the door knocking and going to visit a community in Kitchener, South-Hespeler, this came across my way, and one of the seniors actually shared with me their story, and they said, I'm living here and I cannot be with my spouse. And it's a real issue in Kitchener, South-Hespeler. So one of the things that I truly promote is this. MPPs or elected officials should be priority number one, the constituency that they get elected from, way before anything else. And then these issues that we take it back to Queen's Park and fight for the individuals that we meet day in and day out and speak on their issues. So I believe upstream approach, this is something that I would definitely stand behind and support it as well.
Ms. Riley.
I want to speak to what I see as the root cause of why this even happens, which is this general undervaluing of human life and dignity and respect that we seem to have under the current government, and honestly in some elements of our culture in general. I think, individuals in long-term care are so invisible to those who don't directly know them and or work with them. And as a result, they tend to get forgotten. And we see that in every element of long-term care. And it's honestly, it gets scary. And we saw that during COVID, just how bad sometimes and how undervalued and underfunded and poorly managed that whole system can be. We see it in other areas too. We see it in terms of, underfunding our ECEs who are taking care of young children and trying to develop their brains. We see that in terms of violence in schools and just letting the teachers handle it without any support and a reformed funding model that would really help them. So I think absolutely I'd support legislation that respects humanity, including long-term care, couples staying together.
For our next question, we turn to electoral reform and ranked ballots. A 2016 poll by Abacus Data found that 62% of Canadians preferred ranked ballots over our current first-past-the-post system when presented with both options. Meanwhile, ranked ballot voting is gaining traction worldwide, including in Canadian political party leadership races. Cambridge voters supported ranked ballot elections, but the Ontario government in 2020 banned municipalities from using this voting system. Now, do you support ranked ballot voting for municipalities, and would you push for broader electoral reform? And with that, we begin with Mr. Mohammed of the Liberal Party.
Well, this issue is something that I really need to learn a little bit more, but I know that it's really critical, and this is what the community wants. This is something that we would give the support back to the community and really advocate for what the community needs. I'm all about making sure if the needs of the community, this is their issues and this is what they're promoting, this is something we have to act upon.
Ms. Riley.
I'm with the Green Party. I can't even say how much that would just put us forward and benefit us on such a massive scale. You know, we have so much support in the communities that we try to represent. And at the same time, people are sometimes afraid to give us their actual vote because they worry that not voting for a different party is going to let another party get into power. And that's something that they don't want. I think ranked voting, forget about just the Green Party, it helps give people choice. It helps give people choice. It helps make sure the majority really does get what they want, and it helps make sure we all don't get something that we really don't want, which I think many of us are getting right now.
And Mr. Donkersgood.
Yeah, it was really unfortunate that the Ford government repealed that bill really quickly, actually, in its term. And the City of London had actually gone through an election cycle where they did the ranked ballots, and they were pretty happy and successful with what had happened. We have to listen to our municipalities in terms of what they want and what they need. And I think it does help ease that voter apathy. When people are able to rank their ballot and have choice and, you know, have some sort of say and input on how things happen, I think it gives them a little bit more hope that things can change. So it's something I think that we have to look at from a municipality, like each municipality, and again, talk to constituents. And that involves maybe through referendums and those sorts of things to ensure, you know, we're meeting their needs and what they want.
Okay, for our second to last question, we'll touch on the balanced budget or deficit question. How important to you is the Ontario budget deficit? How should we balance A, a desire to eliminate the deficit, with B, a need to provide funding for essential services, and C, a desire to avoid increasing taxes? And with that, we turn to Ms. Riley of the Green Party of Ontario first.
Great. I've got a business degree. I worked in the private sector for most of my career. Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely always on my mind. Issues, economic issues, whether it be the general economy or governmental fiscal responsibility. How do we balance it? It's going to come down to the details, honestly. There are elements of this province that actually need funding, but that doesn't mean we need to just throw money away. It never will mean that. One thing I do want to highlight is, you know, there are measures that we take, and actually safe consumption sites are a really good example where the government is spending money, but the money that we save on law enforcement and you know, emergency health care dwarfs the spending. So I think, you know, we can look at it from that lens. We can focus on those kind of policies, and we can manage government budget very responsibly while providing necessary services. We don't need big spas, foreign-owned spas in Toronto. We don't need to spend money allowing alcohol to be everywhere versus, you know, systems that were already working just fine.
Mr. Donkersgood.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the questions I often get asked when I'm out talking to people and I'm proposing some of the social programming that the Ontario NDP is offering is, how are you going to pay for it? And my counter to them is, every NDP government provincially throughout our entire country have actually shown that they are more fiscally responsible than any Liberal or Conservative government throughout the country. So we have a track record of actually being pretty fiscally conservative despite the social programming that we're doing. But we also have to make sure that we are being respectful to our taxpayers. That means that we're not digging tunnels under a 401. We're not each subsidizing $400 for a spa in Ontario Place. And we need to generate revenue. Right now, despite Ontario being one of the richest provinces, we're actually quite low on the bottom in terms of the amount of revenue we're making relative to the people in this province. So we have to be very careful, be very mindful of the balancing act that we have to do, but we need to be much more respectful to our taxpayers. Again, not doing frivolous things like $16 billion for the Greenbelt that fell apart. So that would be my answer for that question.
Mr. Mohammed.
Look, Dan, money doesn't grow on trees, right? I'm actually a centered liberal believer, so we don't have too far left thinking or too far right thinking. I truly, what I mean by that is that you have to be fiscally responsible, and also make sure that you address the issues that the community needs, and that money is managed right. So at the moment, the biggest, if you want the community to succeed, you have to invest in your small businesses. Our region, our small businesses are 70% of our economy is reliant on our 70% of small businesses that we have are reliant to our economy. So I would make sure that I take that relief out, cut the taxes from them, so they can survive, so they can generate more employment, so the community thrives when you have a thriving economy.
Our last question of the night will begin with Mr. Donkersgood, and it simply comes down to your vision for Cambridge. What is your personal future vision for the city of Cambridge?
Sure. My vision for the city of Cambridge is one that's full of opportunity and hope, one where we all feel connected and are able to communicate with one another. I moved to Cambridge from Toronto 8 years ago, and it was because I was still commuting back and forth to the GTA as a teacher. And I love it here, and I love that all these different unique aspects from Hespeler all the way down to Galt, it creates such a unique character. But we need to be able to invest in people. We need to be able to continue to invest in our hospital. We need to continue to invest in bridges and the great work that they do, and Porch Light Counseling, all these different community groups that are doing such amazing work. And we also need to be able to invest in our businesses. Like, we have fantastic small businesses in Hespeler, from our restaurants to our, my son goes to music lessons, my daughter goes to art lessons there. Those are these great things in our community that I value and respect, and we need to give that the profile that it deserves.
Mr. Mohammed.
Then I went and I did a lot of door knocking, and I visited Hespeler. Hespeler community is very proud. It has a long history. I visited the Heritage Center, and they are a community that very well connected. There's a lot of small businesses that is out there, and they communicate very well with each other, and it's a community that needs the support that it needs. So I think they're in a very difficult position. So I'm going to say it all right. In the province and the federal, they share a constituency with Kitchener, but in municipalities they share with Cambridge. So they're in that difficult, I wouldn't call it a difficult place, but they're in a, they feel that they're being pulled back and forth. So I think is a community that needs the right representation. Somebody's out there listening. So I'm the one who would be giving an ear and seeing what their needs are and support it accordingly.
And Ms. Riley.
I love Cambridge. We came this close to moving there. I love the identities of each of the individual original towns. And I think the best vision for Cambridge is to just help it stay and become, just an idealized version of what it already is. We talked about transit earlier. I think the idea behind helping expand transit, it's not just about getting around, it's about creating connections. And it's about creating economic opportunities, of course, both ways as well. Bringing more money into the city, allowing residents to have opportunities further in KW or elsewhere. I want to say too, the area around Galt Collegiate, it needs help and it needs attention. I think that, a lot of our plans, when we talk about mental health, it feels so abstract, but the truth is, we're looking to solve root causes of elements that affect our lives, and affect our cities in a very direct way.
We will now begin our closing comments. A reminder to candidates, you have 1 minute for your closing comments, and with that, we begin with Mr. Mohammed of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Dan. This election is unwarranted and intentionally challenging for many, especially seniors, to participate in, and that is exactly why Ford called it at the end of January. The PCs do not care about the people. They care about the private interest. We must address gendered violence and violence in our schools and bring funding back to our education sectors to support our educators and students. We must address the critical underfunding of our healthcare system. Ontarians need family doctors. They need to be able to receive care at hospitals in their cities, not drive an hour away because of the wait. The wait is shorter. Houses are out of reach, and we need to invest in building more faster, because this is government has shown that they can't. We need to support our vulnerable communities, help them to find and afford homes, and access support they need while investing in supporting along the way. We must deliver safe, active transportation and an LRT to Cambridge. The Conservative slogan is Protect Ontario. The question I have is, do you feel protected? Do you feel protected when you don't have a doctor? Do you feel protected when you don't have housing? Do you feel protected when your MPP
Mr. Mohammed,
isn't
your time.
here? Thank you so much.
Ms. Riley.
Great. Okay. Right now, we're in a point in time. We've got 5 years before we hit 2030, and that is one of the big kind of markers of where we're going to be at in terms of whether or not we can limit climate change anywhere close to 1.5 degrees Celsius. There's a lot of information out there about that and what that means, but anything above that is really getting into some trepidation and dangerous territory. The government that we choose today is going to be the government that has that final opportunity to try to hit that target. And this government is going in the wrong direction. They're adding fossil fuels to our grid. They are trying to reduce protection of green spaces. They are not the right choice. And they don't even show up. They don't even feel the need to be accountable to you. We are not powerless here. We are not voiceless. You have some great candidates standing up here today, and you have choices. Please come out and vote. Thank you.
And Mr. Donkersgood.
Yeah. So thanks again, Dan, for moderating, and to Rogers TV, the viewers at home, and to the citizens of Cambridge for providing all three of us here with this opportunity to speak with you today. I'm going to leave you with one question. Has your life over the last 7 years under the Ford provincial government gotten any better? I'm going to tell you that my colleagues in public education would say no. My friends who work in the public healthcare sector, they're also going to say no. People who are on social assistance, such as ODSP and OW, and those who are unhoused or facing addictions, I know they would say no. Renters and those looking to buy their first home, I know they would say no too. And the working class, without a doubt, would say no. And the Ontario Liberals, well, when their leader presents a platform that states they will invest in people, after saying on record that they believe the party had moved too far to the left, I don't know if you can trust them. Voting for Marit Stiles and the Ontario NDP will ensure that we bring forward a plan that invests in our community, in Hespeler and in Kitchener, and that we can restore the promise of a good life for the people here in Ontario.
Thank you once more to all three candidates joining us here in studio. Thank you once more to Rogers TV and community partner Citizens for Cambridge. And we remind viewers to obviously visit citizensforcambridge.org for more extensive candidate information. So for the three candidates here in studio with us this evening, thank you again for tuning in. And remember to get out to vote.